There we go.
Folks, welcome back. It's good to have you here. I'm excited and honored to introduce you to our guest for today, Mark Anielski. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you, Forrest. Thanks for having me.
It's good
Your
to,
beautiful place in Tulum. Yeah.
yeah. Yep, I'm in Tulum right now, coming to everyone from Tulum.
Right.
Um, so, Mark, you and I met through Sarah McCrum, and anyone who listens to my podcast, I imagine, knows Sarah well. She's been a guest on the show, and she's a popular person on my YouTube channel and these circles. So you are a well-being economist, and we got connected through Sarah. I don't want to limit you to just being a well-being economist. I know that that's a partial definition of who you are. You're also an author. You've written a couple of books, The Economics of Happiness and an Economy of Well-being. Um, you're also a friend, someone who I'm getting to get to know. And hang out with and just really enjoy coming into relationship with. So I want to give you a big hearted welcome onto the show and just excited to get to hang out with you for this time and to go where we go.
Well, thanks, Forrest. You've been on my podcast, so now I'm on your platform. So
Yeah.
really happy to be here.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah,
I was on your show a couple of months ago,
that's right.
and that's the Economy of Well-being podcast. Is that the name of
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
I
Okay.
mean, I only probably have 50 listeners, but whatever. It's the
Yeah.
right 50 that listen
I
and
loved our show, and the people who've told me they listened to our episode have given me great feedback. So if anybody's listening to our recording here and you want to go check out Mark's podcast, we did an episode together, and I know you've done other episodes that are really engaging. So
I've done a few. I've done about 150, I think.
wow.
Started. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm ready to dive in. Before I do that, I told you this is a field first podcast. So at the beginning of every show, I take a moment to speak to the field. Field first means we pay attention to, in this podcast, we invite both you and me here on the show and also our listeners to notice not just what we're talking about, the topics and the territories and concepts that we're exploring, the words that we're saying. We're also inviting people to notice where we're speaking from. And we invite listeners to notice where we're listening from. And this podcast is a field first podcast, meaning that we invite all of us to ultimately, I'm just taking a breath here and slowing down a beat, relax into and allow ourselves to be resourced and even recreated from the ground of awakened well-being. So, yeah, nice breath, right?
Qigong kicking it again.
So, welcome to you, welcome to our listeners, and yeah, here we are.
Here we are in the space of breath, or Hawaii, breath over sacred water, in the aloha spirit. Do you know aloha means love?
I do.
I didn't know Hawaii means breath over
I
sacred
didn't
water.
either. Breath over sacred water.
Crazy. Those Polynesians, they knew something.
There's
They still,
something, they still know something. Yeah.
they still know.
I'm curious. I mean, every time you and I connect, I experience such a wealth of information and wisdom and care and love coming from you. And so I wonder what that's cooking up for you these days. Where's your curiosity going? Where are you finding yourself most interested right now?
I'm very interested in what's going on in the world with respect to, because I'm an economist and I spent my life studying money systems and like why, and then the ancient systems of the Polynesians, right? The use of shells as money, right? And we are sort of caught in this uh, trap of an anxiety about money, right? Anxiety about tomorrow. And I think about things like the U.S., Declaration of Independence, And I wish it would say, we find these things self-evident, that we are all created in the image of the creator who is love, and love is who we are, period. That's it. That's all that has to be said. And so during COVID, I rewrote the declaration based on love. And then I went further and kind of articulated it as a constitutional document. We find these things self-evident. Love is who you are. Te aroa airahi in the Tahitian language means may love flourish. And that's a project I was working on with the Tahitians 4 years ago to bring love into the center of the economy de bonheur. And of course, they're French speaking, right? And yet there seems to be um, resistance. I think Einstein said, great spirits have always met with fierce opposition from mediocre minds. I'm not saying accusing others of being mediocre, but where's the courage to declare what is self evident and construct an economy based on love and happiness? Because happiness in Greek means well being of your soul, well being of spirit, and wealth means the conditions of well being. So, a greater conscious awareness of the energy and the original meaning of the words we use, especially in business. Competition meaning to strive together from the Latin. Education from the Latin, educare, to draw forth what's already inside you. What's inside of you? Why were you born? What are your gifts? What are the gifts of the spirit that you have? All of us have a gift, at least one gift. Some say I have the gift of healing. I'm a spiritual economist. Some say it doesn't matter. We are that spark, that breath of love. And yeah, let's just get on with it, Janet, or whatever Monty Python line you want to use. It's kind of silly. Like the stuff we're enduring right now is ridiculous in some ways,
Yeah.
laughable, tragic,
Yeah.
but still pregnant with joy.
Hmm.
And that's where I live. I try to live. Some some of my friends call me Dr. Joy because I think joy, no pun intended, trumps happiness.
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
you could be in pain but still have joy.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, how do we construct a working economy based on these ideas?
Yeah.
Not based on scarcity or lack or fear. Those are all human emotions, but we get caught in those emotions. And I think other entities feed on those negative emotions.
Mm.
But love transcends all things.
Mm.
So I haven't written a book about love, and I'm not sure I even need to, but that's what's on my heart. And I work with a lot of First Nations, indigenous people from the Polynesians and Tahiti to, the Inuit and the Arctic, and they all have that same understanding. And many of them have just lived intergenerational trauma by us grand colonizers who thought our written word and our constitutions would, you know, be more compelling than theirs,
Yeah.
unwritten oral traditions. So I feel privileged to work with them.
Mm.
Humbled because I don't know anything. Just I'm just Forrest Gump.
That makes two of us.
Yeah, that's right. That's why I was like, hey, is that you, Forrest? It is Forrest.
Yeah.
I'm a forester too by profession, so that's really funny. Terrible. Anyways, that's where my mind's at, but really
It's
building
beautiful.
practical solutions to what looks to be intractable, complex things.
Yeah.
They're actually not that complex. We're brilliant human beings. We're way beyond artificial intelligence. I said, what happened to original intelligence? Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, whoever, right? What about love quotient? You know, could we even measure love? Mother Teresa, my favorite line, love does not measure, it just gives.
Mm.
It's like, I'm a measurement guy, so it's like I don't even know how to begin to measure some of these things.
Mm. I mean, I'm really touched by what you shared, and I also I mean, we just have so much in common. I wrote a declaration of interdependence, and it sounds exactly the same to what you wrote. I mean, we need to compare notes, but every human being has a inalienable right to love, compassion, generosity, uh, warmth, wisdom. I mean, there's a whole list of luminosity, silence, um,
Right, right.
and
And so it's interesting, like, and I know we touched on consciousness, and I'm just going to key off on David Hawkins' work, which really affected my life. I was introduced to his work by my naturopath doctor friend, and I was really blown away with his thesis that consciousness is a logarithmic function. And what is consciousness? But to me, it's an alignment with God, with the Creator, right? With love. And so it makes sense that if you live a life of scarcity and fear and anger and apathy, you are disconnected from that higher vibration. And so, what an interesting challenge to, if it's a logarithmic function, we know that just a few of us holding that space as we just did in love raises, just even for a moment, the consciousness of the listener through the frequency of the truth of our words spoken from our hearts. And I think that's a beautiful strategy. Like, how do we lift the consciousness? I calibrated the consciousness of the whole United States in 2022, and I've only found 0.001% of the population at 500 plus consciousness,
and
which
this
is
is 500 on Hawkins' scale. He's got a scale of 0 to 1,000. 500 is love, is that right?
500 is love, 200 is courage, integrity, right? 1,000 is Christ conscious, Buddha conscious, like, off the scale, right? You become light. Beyond 1,000, you become angelic, right? You're in the That's why we can't see angels, because they vibrate at such high frequencies. So yeah, it's a pretty cool thesis, right? That So how do we, when we see this percussion of fear coming in, whether it's, the wars or the economy, right? How do we intervene, right, in a system with our own ability to hold that space of love and help our neighbors, help raise the conscious? Because if it's logarithmic, we have an effect on 1 million Americans just by speaking right now. So they can, for a moment, they might think this is an insane conversation because I'm so busy. I'm worried about my kids, drug addictions, alcoholism, whatever it is, my mortgage, which means a death pledge in French. You see, like all these words, like we say, hold on a minute, you're just like me. We all want the same thing. We were all born here with love, out of love, and we spend our whole life trying to crawl back to that. It's like the happiness curve. It's a smiley face. You're happiest when you're up to about 10 years of age, and then you fall into you know, you bottom out around 41 to 50, and then it gets better again.
I have to tell you, that's not my experience at all, but I do know that curve. I have seen it before. That's not my experience whatsoever.
Well, my friends just produced, because I said our friends were going to see the F1 movie tonight with Brad Pitt, and I said let's talk about why Brad always looks so good. But whatever, he looks like Forrest right now. And I said, that's the happiness curve, and my friend said he used AI. He says, no, this is Mark's happiness curve. It just goes parabolic. I said, oh, that looks like the consciousness curve of Hawkins, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, these are the conversations I love to have. There's few will spend the time to have the conversations.
Mm.
You'll never hear it on CNN. You'll never hear it in the mainstream media. It's just like all emotion.
There is we can talk about the spectrum of how malignant or malicious this is, and there is a phenomena that's happening of the media's gotten so polarized that it's triggering everybody's fight or flight responses. And they said the average attention span of a human being now is like less than 8 seconds or something. And I'm just,
I don't know about you, but I love listening to 4-hour podcasts.
yeah,
Because after the first hour, people actually get real. You
Yeah.
get to know somebody,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
not in 8 seconds or some TikTok. Like,
I've been these shows are a little bit longer. The podcasts that I do are somewhere between an hour and 2 hours, but I've been considering doing some 3 or 4 hour ones. Um, I, I, I think, I mean, Joe Rogan's got the biggest podcast in the world. He does
yeah.
three and a half
Or
hour
like
recordings.
I've listened to an 8 hour Lex Friedman podcast. I don't even know if they took a pee break. I mean, but it's like it's incredible. Like every one of us has an 8 hour life story to share, at
Yeah.
least,
Yeah.
and I think that's what why I'm encouraged with this stuff is like we're all about stories. We all have something to share and give. And what a beautiful life. What a privilege to be alive, right?
I'm curious about your story. How did you get to working with indigenous folks? I mean, it seems like that's been a lot of your work. How did that come into your life?
Uh, well, in 2001, so I had worked as an economist with the Alberta government, and in 2000 I left, and I was I guess I tried to hire onto a director position with redefining progress in San Francisco. So I'm Canadian, and this was the dream job, like moving to San Francisco, and I left my good government job and just did a deep dive into like free falling into the uncertainty of consulting, and that kind of led me on a crazy journey. As soon as I left my comfortable, secure government job, I realized I had to kind of relax into um, God's business plan. I'll put it that way. That why should the phone ring for an ex-bureaucrat economist? Like, who the heck is going to find me? And literally, when I relaxed into that prayer, things started to happen. And then I'm like, my prayer now is just enough. Just enough what? Just enough billable hours. And one day I got a call from a policy guy from Iqaluit, Nunavut. Nunavut had just become a new province in 1999. And they said, his name is Derek Rasmussen, white guy, and a Buddhist monk living in Iqaluit. Iqaluit only has 30,000 people. It's a massive area, right? It's the Arctic. And the Inuit or the Eskimo, you know, and he said, we're we're looking at your work that you did with redefining progress in San Francisco, the genuine progress indicator. Would you be willing to give us a proposal on how we might develop something like that for Nunavut? I said, I'd love to. You gonna fly me up there? It's a long ways, right? It's Frobisher Bay. It's like, anyways, I went up there 2001 and it changed my life. Like I got there in the ground. I realized that these ancient people, when I sat with caribou hunters, they literally say, we are the caribou is us. We're one in being with the land. And I felt that. And they said to me when I was going to leave, while your body will no longer be with us, your spirit will always be with us. So I did my work and developed these indicators of well-being for the Inuit based on their traditional law. Now, what's interesting about who I was working for, I wasn't working for the Nunavut government. I was working for their corporation called Nunavut Tungavut Incorporated. It was created as a business entity that was managing their $1.2 billion land claim. So they created a province, right? It became one of the next provinces in Canada, not the 51st state, but anyways. and the and so this organization had a mandate to report to the people and the state of culture. And they were really attracted to the work I did with redefining progress in San Francisco to create these new indicators called genuine progress indicator. So when I went there, I said, can we meet with the elders so that I can hear them speak about their core values, their sacred teachings, because I want to make sure the indicators line up with those sacred teachings. And those sacred teachings are they're just so obvious. They're about, stewardship and caring, midwifery, hunting, building an igloo, basic things that would allow them to flourish on that harsh landscape. And then I saw the movie when I was there, it just got released, called Atu Najarat, The Fast Runner. It's the most beautiful, slow, nothing's happening in the film. They're just sitting in an igloo, tending their oil lamps, in the winter. And one of the dudes goes a little rogue, and it's a total cultural profile. Like, if someone goes rogue in this little community of 5 families, you got to deal with that rogue guy.
Hmm.
You cast him out and the women manage the whole thing. They're the ones who are the matriarchs of the wisdom keepers. So all of this in like a few short days of being there blew my mind. Just like, what do they have to teach me? And then what happens is, and it's very mystical. It's is during COVID, I was asked to by the Treaty 8 Nations of Alberta. So I'm in Edmonton, Alberta. There are 11 numbered treaties in Canada. They're huge, covers most of Canada in territory. Treaties were signed with the Crown, with the monarch of Britain, and so I'm working for the chiefs of Treaty 8, which is Northern Alberta, has all the oil sands or massive oil sands asset here. And they said, could you develop a natural resource assessment of all the land, which is our land, our unceded territorial land? I said, yes, I can. So as I got to be invited, and when you're working with them, when they start teasing you, you're trusted.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
they call, like in the Cree word, they called me Munia, which just means white guy. I think sometimes it means shithead or you colonizer bastard or whatever. But and they laugh, and the elder, the pipe carrier, says he's 85. Mike Beaver's his name. He goes, we prayed for you to come to us. It's like, okay. And then you go in the sweat lodge and you see the ancient ceremony when they talk to the ancestors in the pitch black, and you hear animal spirits come into the sweat lodge, and you pass the peace pipe around and ask them, what am I supposed to pay attention to? We're just passing this stone pipe around. And Mike says, when the smoke goes up, it goes up to the ancestors. I said, so can I get this right? If I bring a document like a proposal to start a new bank, and I put a ribbon around it and I bring some tobacco because that's what you do, what happens? Well, you offer tobacco, you put it down, you smoke the pipe. Yeah, then what happens? We wait 96 hours. You wait 96 hours for what? We wait for the ancestors to respond. You've offered this as a prayer. In what form do the ancestors appear? Could be an eagle, could be an otter, could be a loon, right? Could be a mouse. Like, these are animal spirits, these are our ancestors, and they will affirm whether it is pleasing what you've offered or suggested. See what I'm saying? So now we like, oh, the strategy is prayer. The strategy is always prayer. And we always defer to the creator, to God, right? Because we're living in the will of God. And that's what I've learned. And they keep inviting me across this country, and now working with the Cree of Northern Quebec, Hudson's Bay way up there, right? All that hydro and gold assets. I'm doing analysis of a third of the province of Quebec. So it just keeps going. And it's unsolicited. Like, I'm not even applying for any, I'm not bidding on anything. It's just, we heard about you. Can you do this? Yeah, I can do that. As long as pay my flight, I'll come and see you. I'll come way up north. I want to go to Nunavut again because it changed my life back in 25 years ago.
Wow.
So and I'm humbled because they're like child spirit. I mean, physiologically, I'm like, why can't you handle alcohol? Maybe you're like the ancient Lemurians. Maybe you're like, but you never, see, you were never vanquished. What if the Pacific is a sunken Lemuria before Atlantis? I don't know. What are we, what are we not paying attention to? Why do we have to destroy them, try to murder them, genocide them, and they're still here, reminding us? I always tell the story. Who inspired Ben Franklin? The Onondaga of upstate New York at Syracuse, who kept the sacred fires of the Six Nations, the Haudenosaunee or Iroquois Confederacy, who received the Great Law of Peace given by a medicine man from supposedly Lake Ontario. Who knows how long ago, 2,000 years ago? Maybe it was Jesus. Who knows? I don't know. And they gave the women the Great Law of Peace. And that's what inspired your founding fathers. And nobody goes up there. Donald Trump doesn't go up there and say, thank you. Remind us again what we have forgotten. The Great Law of Peace is pretty simple, pretty obvious. So those are things I've learned in the last literally the last 10 years. I was in the Onondaga Longhouse in 2014. Well, we drove up from Manhattan to Syracuse in end of January. It was cold. Bald eagles flew over us on the way. We offered tobacco to Lake Onondaga, super fun site, and a bald eagle flew over us at minus 15 Fahrenheit over that lake. It's like, see, they're happy because we're going to help heal Lake Onondaga. Not with technology, with the ancient Polynesian protocol of Ho'oponopono, which means to make right what is right. And that's a very simple statement. Lake Onondaga, I love you. The men wouldn't believe what I just said, but the women like, yes, that's what we must do. We must return the lake to love even as much as we've polluted it and destroyed it. Those are it's just some of my experiences. I know they're crazy. They happen like so fast and every day, like I can't keep up. But when you're just in that flow, miracles happen, right? And we live in that state of, Hawkins always ends his books as Gloria in excelsis Deo. That's Latin to glorying to God in the highest. It's like, so here we are, right? Having this awesome, well, I'm just blathering on, but I'm just trying to speak truth. And when I speak from my heart, which is where love lives, then people say, yeah, I understand. Like when I used to be on book tour of my book in the US, there would always be somebody in the audience would come up to me and say, I see you. It's like, I see what you're doing. I'm just talking economics. No, you're not. It's like, okay, you've got me. I'm just when I was in Tahiti in 2012, I was invited by the president with 2 days notice to replace the Princess of Bhutan who was supposed to come and speak to 1,000 youth with the president there. And they're all French speaking and Tahitian. So in the middle of my PowerPoint presentation, I just stopped and I went, you are the island of love. How can I say that? Because James Cook, who came here to watch the transit of Venus across the sun 265 years ago and then got killed in Hawaii, said, I have arrived at the island of love. He said, love is who you are. So no more complaining about the French and the colonizers. Get off your seats and be the love who you are. And then I was called the most dangerous man in the South Pacific because I made that statement. And the press, you know, interviewed young people after, said, who is this economist from Canada? I was like, I'm just reminding you of who you are.
It seemed like right there at the last moment there was some emotion for you.
Oh, there was emotions. So this I don't tell this story very often. So I'm there. So I just told you on Friday at noon, I got a call from my friend Mark Collins, who had been Tahiti's tourism minister under President Oscar Temaru. He said, Mark, you won't believe it. I've been trying to get you here since 2008, since your book came out. And because he said, I want you to advise the French Polynesian government on your ideas and the economics of happiness. I said, yeah, sure. That would be a great day when you invite me to Tahiti. And he said, well, it's the day. It's like, what do you mean? It's like, here's the bad news. Are you willing to be on a plane on Tuesday? We have tickets for you. You'll be VIP. And I asked my wife, Jen, can I go to Tahiti on Tuesday? How long are you gonna go? I don't know, like a week, I guess. And sure, go. So I went. I arrived. Everything started. Mark picked me up at the airport. Mark Collins. He said, my only goal is to have you have enough time with the president as I can. Okay. Who's this guy? Oscar Temaru in his 70s. So I so the very first got there at 6 in the morning, got into the VIP lounge in the airport. There were all these like beautiful women, Miss Tahiti's, all in their full regalia. And like I was like, wow. I meet the president, I meet the senator to France. I'm taken to the president's private dining room for lunch with Keanu Reeves's cousin from Hawaii, who's seeking independence for Hawaii, returning it back to the kingdom. I meet all these diplomats, and Oscar Temaru says, "Would you come to my office Sunday morning and teach me and my vice president the economy of well-being, economy de bon air? Brief me, set the entire platform so I can consider adopting it." So I did, and it just kept going and going like that. And the day, so that I was the last speaker because I was a shoe-in, right? It's like, come speak. I put on my because I advised the Chinese government for 3 years on the same Shao Kang. Shao Kang means well-being in Confucian terms. That's China's national economic policy. Can you imagine? Shao Kang meaning well-being since 1979. Anyways, I put my Chinese happiness jacket on, which is red, and the symbol of happiness in the Chinese culture are five bats, wing to wing, in a circle. So I put this jacket on, I get up and I give this speech presentation. I get off the stage. All these youth come to me and they're giving me t-shirts and like hugging me. I'm like, what's going on? Then Mark picks me up and he says, Mark Collins, he picks me up and he says, you won't believe who you've been invited to dinner by. Who? It's like Mr. Alagata. Oh, who's Mr. Alagata? He's like the Howard Hughes. He's the guy who created the tourism brand. He's a recluse. He lives up on the mountain. And he's invited you for dinner right now, tonight. I was like, okay. He says, that's like getting invited to the White House to have lunch with Donald Trump. Okay, let's go. Mark was just twitching. He was like, he couldn't believe it. And so we drive up to this jungle kind of place on the mountaintop, and I could hear strains of Wagner playing, like operatic music. And we walk in, and Mr. Otto's in his 80s. He says, Mr. Anielski, do you know why you're here? I said, no, nice to meet you, Mr. Otto. He says, you are the most dangerous man in the South Pacific. I said, oh, thank you for the compliment. What? Why, Mr. Atta? He says, because I heard youth talking interviewed after you spoke. They were talking about your ideas. So, oh, you think my ideas are dangerous? I said, I was just speaking what I know about your island. And he said, well, welcome to my dining room. And so we sat down. Mark Collins was there. And this other young woman, her name was Hina now, and she was the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Like Tahitian, French, Chinese, Mark Collins sat next to her. He was just like, oh my God, I'm smitten. She then comes and says to me, I was in the auditorium when you spoke, and I need to tell you what happened. It's like, what happened? When you said love, she said, it was like a wind went through the auditorium and it hit me in the chest, and I cried. So that's the emotion you might see in me. Like, you cried, and yeah, long story short, Mark actually falls in love with her, is then dating her like 6 months later. Anyway, it was so weird. And by the time I left Tahiti, I had 10 full hours with the president. And Mark took me to the airport. He goes, I cannot believe it. That that never happens. That just doesn't happen. And they were saying, well, the French Secret Service are probably following you. It's like, who cares? I'm the most dangerous man on the island because I just talked about love. Like, anyways, that's some of my stories of, yeah. So it's a beautiful, like for me, it's a beautiful story about just living in that place of surrender, of peace, right? Of joy. And things just happen, and you don't have any clue what's going to happen when you wake up in the morning. But like every day you wake up is like Christmas. That's one message my old friend who had been diagnosed with terminal leukemia at 65, which I am now. He said, I'm not going to die. I'm going to learn how to heal his body, which is a miracle. And he lived another 30 years. And he would tell me his name was Oris. He says, why? He looks around the room, a restaurant, he goes, why are people so grumpy? You woke up this morning. It's Christmas. And I like, I loved it. He was a marketing guy, but I learned a lot from him.
Yeah, I love that. Christmas morning every day. It's
Right, Christmas morning every day. The
oh,
sun came up. I'm learning about, oh, maybe we're doing the wrong thing. Instead of opening our phones and looking at a green screen, you're in Tulum, like those sacred astronomical, greet the sun from 5 to 8, greet the sunrise. And I could show you a picture of the sun, what it actually is. And then you realize it's not just red spectrum light, it's a doorway to heaven. It's literally the doorway to heaven. And it's like, we just don't get it. And I'm handicapped because I live bloody like 53rd latitude. So like sun might get up at 5 right now, but not in January. Anyway, that's just a lot. Yeah. So that's my story so far. So far, no regrets. Like we could talk about past life. I've had people say, well, you don't have any past life. So it's all my first rodeo. People thought, oh yeah, I think I was this and that. It's like, I don't remember anything. I'm Forrest Gump. I was just born. Was I born happy? No, I've had my struggles, of course. I've had anxiety. I've prayed a lot about anxiety. But when you stare in the face that money anxiety and it disappears, then you're like, I'm free and I want every one of my neighbors, my friends to be free from that money anxiety. That's what motivates me. That's what gets me up in the morning.
we
I
s-
want to flip.
we say more about the money anxiety.
Well, if I go to the heart of every American I talk to, and I'm not saying Canadians are much different, if I get to the heart of their anxiety, it's usually around money. If I get into the heart of their conflict with their loved one, their spouse, it's generally about money. I'm like, if I told you, as Henry Ford said, if you knew how easy it was to create money, there would be a revolution tomorrow. And there's no revolution because Did you actually win the war with Britain? Why did you not put the money power in the hands of the people in your legal documents, your constitution? Why did you back away from that? You think you're a wonderful republic? Yes, but you didn't. You didn't win the money power war. It's still controlled out of London, and you don't understand. Or maybe some presidents did understand and they lost their lives, like Lincoln and Kennedy. But these things are, they're, there's significant issues that people will hold on to that power and keep it hidden from plain sight, as Henry Ford said, or John Galbraith said. The creation of money is so simple, the mind is repelled, he wrote in his book on money in 1971. What do you mean, John? Those who need to study, understand money, need to follow the rabbit up the magician's sleeve. Who's a magician? Who has the power to create all the money in our economy and then charge us interest as if the privilege to create money ex nihilo out of thin air wasn't enough? And we think that's okay to allow those corporations to continue to operate, even though, according to my current math, the average American household is paying 49% of their income is going to interest charges on the total amount of debt in the United States. That's over 102 trillion. That's not just the federal debt. It's all debt because debt is money. It's not seashells like the Polynesians taught us. It's something that we allowed private corporations to create the majority of. And we still think it's okay. And I'm saying, no, we could flip the script. Why doesn't one president just try to write an executive order and flip the script? What are you afraid of? I could do it. If I was president, even if I knew I was going to die the next day, get shot, I'd do it. It would be all over. Or I'd start a GameStop phenomena. You know what happened with GameStop? Like, how did all these gamers suddenly almost kill the hedge fund dudes in New York? That's what I'm talking about. That's real. And that's not revolution with anger. That's like, no, we're going to become each other's bankers. It's going to be messy. It'll be complicated. But if I can tell Americans that I could save you 20 hours a week of unnecessary labor that you're now, right, compelled to work because you're paying half of that to private banks who created the debt, and they're charging you interest from a privilege that only they have. No, that's injustice. And that's part of my own story, which is my Jerusalem story. In 1992, I thought I'd be a monk or a priest. And I went to Jerusalem. I went to the Holy Sepulchre every night and I prayed. It's like, and I got it. It's like, oh, you only got mad once, Jesus, at the money changers. Why did you get mad? You never showed any anger, emotion, except to them. Why? Because they were breaking that beautiful relationship when you went to the temple and prayed and bought your your blood offering, your little dove or something. They charged a tax on that privilege. And Jesus said, no, that's wrong. You go with a pure heart. My Father will hear you, no matter where you're praying. And yet, this same money power still exists 2,000 years or 3,000 years later. Like, what the heck? It's like, and so my prayer was, you want me to do something different. You want me to help create this new economy of love. And it has to start with a money system. So that's an injustice that is perhaps strategic. It's very easy to change it. You could get one big Sharpie and put it in front of Donald Trump and you just sign it.
So what would I mean, if you got the Sharpie in your hand and you're writing this executive order to give to Donald Trump, what's it say?
From this day forth, all debts of the United States are zeroed out. Every individual, every American now is a by birthright is a careholder of the union, and we will create money in exact proportion to the needs of the nation without ever charging interest. Banks can still exist and operate, but they will do so in the spirit of, a true central bank or state banks, which are public banks, where each one of us are one share, one vote. The real spirit of democracy as the Greeks envisioned. And people say that won't work. I said, okay, let's think about who's got the most to lose here. 300 million, 355 million Americans or 1 million high net worth Americans who, may not even be aware of the injustice they're part of. So I'd say this executive order from this day forth, we zero out, we say China, we say to all the foreign debt holders of American T-bills, we're just cleaning it off. Chinese don't care. Japanese don't care. Really, they don't care about the bonds they hold. And what would that do? It would reduce the economy. The whole economy would, and then we'd have to slowly re eliminate private debt. How many Americans are holding about $20,000 of credit card debt today? Now, and I wouldn't do it. I might try to do it like overnight, or I might say we're going to do a 1 year or 2 year, right, transition here. But now we're going to move to what Ben Franklin talks about in his Philadelphia experiment, that money must be connected to land, to true alloidial title property. I don't know if you know this, but Jefferson's Jefferson's line was life, liberty, and private property. It was not happiness. Why private property? Why is it important? See what I'm saying? It's like, so now currency is directly connected to the assets of the nation, which includes the land and the people and their innate productivity in the spirit of the word education, right? To be able to live the gifts that you're given. And I've laid this all out in a spreadsheet. I could send you my spreadsheet. Here's how it would work. It
I would
would be,
I would love to see it. If we could link it in the show notes for anybody listening, that would be really cool.
I'll post it on LinkedIn or something. No, it's honestly simple. Like you ask the question, where's the balance sheet of the United States of America? A true balance sheet. There isn't one. What if you accounted for the all the potential life energy of every American living today? How many billions of hours would that be? What if money was connected to those hours of potential? And nobody ever again goes to sleep with any money anxiety. But with that comes enormous responsibility. So what I'm saying is like this isn't going to be like tomorrow you wake up like Truman in the Truman Show, and you're like, how are we going to behave towards one another? If you suddenly have 20 extra hours a week because you don't have to work for the interest, what are you going to do with the 20 hours? Just going to go back to your addictions and your junk food and your whatever? Or are we going to say, and this is what my own discovery was, like when I realized I don't have to work as many hours because I'm debt free, what do I do with that discretionary time now? Well, I can spend 2 hours with a young person talking about their dream of a entrepreneurial startup or right. Those are the complicated because the fact is we're all born into this matrix and it's very hard for us to imagine a world without those anxieties.
You
But
know,
again, I Yeah, I know exactly what I would do if I was head of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is a private cartel of 1913. Like, he already lost. Back in 1913, it was over. Woodrow Wilson regretted it. The bankers of London won the day. They captured you. Like JP Morgan and Rockefellers, like they're all like, I'm not, I don't take anything away from them. They're smart. They had absolute control of the money system. And Lincoln knew this. Lincoln got killed because he gave him the finger. They're blackmailing, they were financing both sides of the Civil War at 60%. Lincoln said, forget it. I'll just print greenbacks and we'll win this war. And London was pissed. British are still pissed because they're back the South.
On a just to bring in, I know we're speaking at the systemic level right now. Uh, I would add, so I'd add a couple things on the systemic level. I mean, there's a monopoly on currency right now. You know, in the United States, you can only spend US dollars. You can't spend euros or pesos or, you
Or
know,
even Bitcoin. Like, okay, can I go to a 7-Eleven with my Bitcoin?
right, exactly. So one way to even take a small step and start to open this up is to create a marketplace for currency itself.
Exactly.
People tend to have such a beef with capitalism, and it's like, well, there's a monopoly on currency in the capitalism society we live in. So we're not really experiencing capitalism
Or not.
when there's a
Uh,
monopoly on capital.
so we see a war, what's interesting and I've really thought about this at Bretton Woods, the Americans won the day, right? Keynes wanted more of a what the BRICS are have put together, a kind of a platform for nations to trade with their respective currencies, but trade what? Trade in what I would argue is their natural advantages of their nation, right? So if Germans build better cars, then okay, the Germans can, it's not that every country can't build their own vehicles, but the whole trade model is all messed up. And I like the BRICS idea because, of course, but it's a challenge to the US dollar hegemony. So we got to, diversity is important here, right? As an ecosystem. So you're right, we need that kind of, and so it's like, no, no fool wants war. So why do we have wars? Because we want to maintain this hegemonic system
And
of
you
a monopoly of currency. Like it's ridiculous.
I mean, and it's amazing to look at the history of currency in connection with war because that's what central banks were created for. I mean, you can trace it back to the Bank of England in the late 1600s, or you can go
That's right.
even earlier. You can look at the Roman Empire that was using salt as a currency, and then they went into the ocean and pulled a bunch of more. The word salary comes from the word salt. That was the currency. And then they went in the ocean and pulled out a bunch of salt to be able to continue to build a war regime, and the Roman Empire collapsed.
Exactly. It seems like not that history always, but right, are we just recycling the same? Has any civilization, I think that's my question about, again, with indigenous people,
Yeah.
has any civilization, and let's talk civilization here, endured? The Chinese, probably the longest sustained civilization. And I tell people, you know what the Chinese got the idea of money from? The indigenous people of Taiwan, who were the Polynesians,
Mhm.
who used seashells, and the Chinese then adopted the shell economy and then started coinage.
Yeah.
So whether that predates the Roman civilization or like who knows really what was going on in Asia then compared to, the Rome. But to your point, it's like this is the thing that I think we've lost from these indigenous cultures is like, what was money to them? I mean, you'd say, oh, well, it was complicated. It was just pure barter, exchange of equivalents of physical things, like, and that was messy.
Yeah. Yeah, and there was a emergent property to it. The money was getting refined. I mean, initially you traded a chicken for a cow, and then it became salt and tobacco, and then it became gold and silver. So there's a refinement process of finding more and more efficient exchanges. But it's amazing to me, just to put one more point on the on this association between war and money. Look at the two biggest line items on the US budget. One is the Department of Defense or the War Department, and the other one is the interest on the national debt. So the
And
two biggest expenses in the United States budget are war and interest on money.
the interest on money was already because they use weasel words like net interest. Like, no, I want gross interest. I'm a finance guy. I want the gross interest charges on the national debt.
So let
And
me
that's exceeded the US military budget for a few years now, probably as early as 2018. And some say that was the end of the Roman Empire when that happened.
and there's only 7 or 8 or 9 years in total that the United States has existed, that it hasn't been in a war.
That's right. It's incredible, isn't it? Like, what?
U.S. has been in war the entire time it's existed,
And
essentially.
I go to, when I was advising the Chinese, because everyone's like paranoid, like, oh, you're working for the commun. And I'm not working for, I'm here to learn about their ancient culture. And they would say, would you just tell your Western friends that we've never been a hegemonic empire or never been, we were always attacked. We're a civilization. What does that mean? We can assimilate anyone who tries to attack us. The Mongols attacked us. We tried to build the wall. It didn't work. But our resilience is we assimilate others into our culture and we're not hegemonic. We could have conquered the seas of the world in the 14th century, but we didn't. So please don't create this boogeyman and say we want to control the world. We're a trading people. Like, stop the rhetoric.
Well, let me offer another possibility here because we're speaking about the possibility of forgiving debt with an executive order signed by Donald Trump and reversing the what was done in 1913. You know, most of my libertarian friends say 1913 was the year that like the worst legislative year ever because you got the income tax in addition to the Federal
Oh
Reserve,
yeah.
in addition.
You're using trade. Okay, trade tariffs worked back then, but they're not going to work the same right now. All these things, so you can wind this thing all the way back. But again, I would take it back to 1774. Franklin was over there in France, and like you must have known that to truly decouple from Great Britain was to have your own sovereign money system, and you didn't finish the job. So, I mean, again, hats off to the city of London, the little square mile, and everyone goes, "What are you talking about, Mark?" It's like it's still the money power and their funny little traditions of smoking cigars, and they're like, they just laugh because they're a sovereign entity under the Magna Carta from 1215 onwards. Nothing has changed. I'm like, okay, if they're the enemy, why aren't we declaring war on the Corporation of London? Okay. Why are we bombing Iran? Or why are we like, what the hell?
Well, there's a let me say this one piece. So I earlier this week I was meeting with a woman who last year wrote up an IOU for some thousands of dollars, about $10,000 to me. And that debt has been in our relationship now for the better part of a year. And I just told her this week we had a meeting and I said, I don't want to do this anymore. This thing where you owe me money. Like this is terrible. Like
Terrible. It's
awful.
a yucky feeling, right?
That's what I said. I was like, here we have this beautiful relationship, and then there's this vibration of debt, and it just sucks. Like it just destroys every married couple, every business partnership couple, every group of people that I've ever worked with that has debt in the relational field. It just wreaks havoc on the dynamic and the connection. And so I
It's
just
so interesting, right? It's so interesting. And what, and we can bring Sarah in here. It's like, So a lovely book personifying money, but I'll challenge Sarah, like, you can't give money just, it's not money that's the root of all evil, right? It's the love of money or whatever, and then the power to create the money, which corrupts, I think. But it's funny when you touch this, like, why do we feel so yucky? Like my friend asked me, I need $500. I'm like, yeah, but first of all, I have to ask my wife, do you think this is the right thing to do? But even if I do it, it's like I still feel like they should ultimately pay me back, right? Because that's a responsible thing to do. But I feel yucky about that too.
And that's what's really opening for me because we just burned up this agreement. We just said, "Hey, you don't owe me this money anymore. Like this is stupid." And that I wanted to bring that because of the conversation we're having. There is a way this could be addressed with an executive order at the national or international level that all debts forgiven for everyone forever, essentially. But it's also we have this power as people. We can go, "Hey, so and so owes me $5,000 and I'm not prescribing anybody anything, but you have the option to look at people and just go, you know what? Forget about it. Like I mean, you don't have to pay me that. And just
Well,
to,
yeah, this is the great paradox, Forrest. When you study how banks actually create the loans, the actual process, they literally create when you actually are the agent that creates the loan by simply asking for the mortgage. Do you know that? You're the contracting party. The bank says, "Oh, let's look at the computer for us, like credit rating," and the computer says, "Yeah, you're good for a $200,000 mortgage." The moment that keystroke is entered, it creates an immediate new deposit on one side of the balance sheet and the liability on the other side. It's created 200,000 out of thin air. It never existed. It didn't come from within their system. That's a lie. It just magically appears. And you're like, and then what? Well, the 200,000, by the time you pay off that mortgage in 25 years, you've paid two and a half times that principal because you agreed to pay 5% or whatever interest on it, which they don't actually never had to really charge you because they just need to recover. Like my whole thesis is if they're just operating on a some type of business principle of fair return, then recover your operating costs, a little bit of money to shareholders or but if you got a credit union structure, you are the shareholder. So like we would all benefit, right? By eliminating interest charges and just operating on a cost recovery basis, which I've shown empirically, and I know a bank in Sweden that operates that way. I know it's possible. But even there, when I presented, I set the table to the First Nations I work with, like, here's your bank. You have millions of dollars sitting invested over here. Your members are living in poverty. They can't even repair their homes. And I could show you how to create a bank that creates just enough liquidity based on the money you've got invested in the market over there by some other investment firm. And your members are going to vote you in for life because you're a hero. And yet they don't do it. And that's the interesting thing. They're like, it's still scary. It's like, okay, I guess. But to your point, right? And I think the experiments maybe happen in circles like, you know, your church, your church organization or whatever, you know. I've tried it as well in my Catholic circles. And it's like, still, it's like, everyone's too busy. I'm like, that's insane. Why is there not a bank for Catholics? Why? We have trillions of assets called churches and land, and we can't create zero interest loans? Are you kidding me? You know how many Christians we would attract? If we, but then it's all possible. So I blame the church leaders too. I'm like, you're also responsible for not acting in what's practically possible. I'm not putting anyone in jail. I'm not saying the banks are evil or, I'm not saying any of that. They should absolutely exist, but in an ecosystem of, when Lincoln was around, there were hundreds of small banks, of local banks. Why did you have local banks in Iowa or wherever? Because you served the farmers who lived there, right? You were the credit facility, and a lot of those little banks actually printed their own money. And then what happened after Lincoln dies? Like, it's a train wreck. Now we got the Federal Reserve, and it's like it's over. They've captured you, like everything you thought you fought for. And again, it's like I'm pointing to the past that could be easily adopted in a blockchain, cryptocurrency, system. And Bitcoin is a good, yes, it's a good start, but it's also based on gold. And I'm not saying it's not based on what I'm talking about. It must be tied to real assets and well-being. That's my thesis. And it can be.
I have a little bit of a split happening for me in this moment, Mark, because there's more questions I could ask you, and I know we're also coming up on time. So I'm wondering how to.
Yeah, we can shift because it like the money discussion is heavy, right? I mean, and to the beginning of our conversation, like it's okay to acknowledge it's like for me, it's you could tell I'm like driven because I feel the injustice. At the same time, a lot of people go at this point they kind of check out because it's like it's too much. I don't know what to do on Monday. I don't know what to do about this.
Yeah.
And so I'd rather like, okay, we could pivot and go to consciousness or love or
Well, there's, one thing I can offer in this conversation for people who are listening and feeling like, okay, this is a lot and this is heavy and this is intense. It can be really intense in the low back and in the kidneys. There's a lot of anger there and things. So, um, one of the things that I want to name is as we become aware of the systems that we're living in and how they work, one question that I have found tremendously empowering is basically to in contemplation and reflection and meditation, basically ask myself, who would I be and what kind of person would I be and how would I walk through the world without money in the picture at all? Like just take money out of it.
that would be excellent, wouldn't it?
And I just invite anybody who's here with us, if you've made it this far in the podcast, to spend some time in meditation and reflection and contemplation and prayer in these questions. Who would I be if money just, it's like people ask this in a bunch of different ways, whichever one feels like it's got the juice for you. Like if you had all the money in the world, how would you spend your time? Who would you be and how would you spend your time? Or if money was not an object, how would you act? But the basic, if you had that trust with life, with consciousness, with the universe, um, with the divine, that no matter what, everything's going to be okay. No matter what, everything's going to be fine. How does that start to move you through your life? And that's the liberation that's available to all of us, regardless of our economic situation, regardless of our current position, regardless of the systems that we're working in, is we can take our power back. We've projected our power onto our systems and gone, the banks have all the power, the government has all the power, the big tech companies have all the power, the pharmaceutical companies have all the power, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, what if we take back that projection and reclaim our own power and go, who would I be and how would I be?
That's brilliant. And maybe we can reflect on our friend Sarah's work. Like I respect her book because it's helped a lot of people, I think.
A lot, yeah.
Transcend that. What you're saying is like, yes, imagine if you woke up and you didn't have that anxiety anymore, or whatever it is, your relationship with money, whether it's a personified relationship now, or you hear Sarah's money friend saying, you know,
Yeah.
everything's okay. You can literally manifest this stuff if you right.
And
And
that's yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
it's great. It's a fun exercise, but I said I'm going to push back, Sarah, a little bit because I'm not going to give the system that is a corporate structure that has the power and say I'm giving money a free ride here in the sense of you know what I'm going getting at. But the testimony too is, I think my own lived experience, like when I came to that place of like no more debt, there was that moment as a business person, I'm like, how many hours do I actually have to work to maintain this home and feed my kids and all those things, right? And I was like, actually, it's not that much. It's 90 billable days a year. It's not that much.
Well,
Yeah.
and if you're really the more we find our thing, it's like I think it was Naval Ravikant who said like if you really find what's yours to do in this lifetime, you won't have holidays, you won't have weekends, you won't have a 9 to 5, but you won't have work either, right? It's
No,
like
you won't.
all this
It's
stuff just falls away and you just have a life. It's
it's
all
true. You just have a life.
you just have a life.
Well, it's like the First Nations work. I just have a life. I mean, the hardest thing sometimes is to say no, right?
It is the most important thing. I mean, this is what I people do not realize. I see this all the time. I didn't realize this, and I work with people on their relationship with money. I work with people on their business. I mean, so much. Hundreds of people at this point, hundreds, married couples, business partners, founders. I have clients who are billionaires. I have clients who are broke. I've been broke. I've had lots of. I mean, it's been a money party in a lot of ways. But um,
Oh, you can write a book.
yeah, maybe there's a book to be written. But oh, I lost the thread. I lost the thread.
Oh, I like because it was like but, comma.
The no piece. So people don't realize that we can't say yes without being able to say no, right? And
Yes.
we
Yes.
oftentimes don't realize this is like the really key insight. People don't realize that like in order to say yes to our destiny or the divine or what's truly for us, there's a lot of things we have to say no to. Like my friend Hannah Taylor says, the life that's truly for you is going to cost you a lot of really great lives. You know what I mean? Like if you go the 100% all the way route, it's going to cost you a lot of 95% lives that you could have. And that's tough. But the thing
True.
people don't realize is that when you're saying yes to something that's not truly for you, you're saying no to what is for you. And people don't see that. They go, oh, I have a problem saying no. I'm going, you don't realize you're already saying no. You're saying no to what is your deepest, most essential nature by saying yes to what isn't.
Precisely, precisely. Yeah. And this goes also to the heart of like as human beings, when I first went to Tahiti, what they told me, like they said, okay, why we call the island of love? Well, because and they still remember, said our grandfathers used to wake up at 5 in the morning. They'd walk in the lagoon, throw the nets in, catch some fish for the day. The papayas would just fall off the trees and the coconuts. Uh, so I said, "Ooh," and you maybe fixed your thatch roof.
Right.
That was your productive day. So I was like, let me get this right, about 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the British come, we want you to work our sugar plantations. Like, are you insane? Like, we work 2 hours a day. We have everything we need, right? And this is right. This is like, wait a minute, that was only in 2 generations. It's like, yeah, now we're stuck. Our kids want the technology. They want, so it's but you're right about the yes and the no and the
I'm just looking this up real quick because there's a story, The Businessman and the Fisherman. Have you heard
oh
this?
yeah, that one.
Yeah.
And the MBA guy who comes and says, well, you could. Isn't it related to Mexico? It comes down to Mexico and says, "Oh yeah, you could." But if you had like this fleet of boats, you would. And they're like, "Yeah, but then
Totally.
it's like,
The fisherman is lying on a beautiful beach with a fishing pole propped up in the sand and his one line cast out into the surf, enjoying the warmth of the afternoon sun and the prospect of catching a fish. A businessman comes walking down the beach, trying to relieve some of the stress of the workday. He's curious why the fisherman was fishing instead of working harder to make a living for himself and a family. You aren't going to catch that many fish with one line, the businessman says to the fisherman. You should be working rather than lying on the beach. The fisherman asked the businessman, "And what will my reward be?" The businessman says, "You can get a bigger net and catch more fish." "And then what will my reward be?" The fisherman asks, smiling. Businessman says, "You can make money and you'll be able to buy a boat, which will result in larger catches of fish." "And then what will my reward be?" The fisherman asks again. The businessman um, says, "You can buy a bigger boat and hire some people to work for you." "And then what will my reward be?" says the fisherman. The businessman says, "Don't you understand? You can build up a fleet of fishing boats and sail all over the world and let your fishermen catch fish for you." And the fisherman says, "And then what will my reward be?" The businessman says, "Don't you understand? You can become so rich you'll never have to work for your living again. You can spend all your rest of your days sitting on the beach looking at the sunset. You won't have a care in the world." The fisherman looks up and says, "And what do you think I'm doing right now?"
I know, right? It's so true. It's like we're just like insane. Like, and I laugh, the mutiny in Bounty, like so Marlon Brando goes down to Tahiti, right, in 1962 and they film and I'm like, so I'm reading this story about mutiny in the Bounty. I'm like, what the hell? If you were a bloke in Liverpool thrown on a boat and you had to sail for how many months? 6 months, and you got to this island where everyone was gorgeous, tanned, you know, and you're like, we're not going back home. Like we're we're gonna marry a nice Tahitian gal
Yeah. Well,
and
and that's
live
what
happily ever after.
people say, what would we be doing? And I'm like, try eating watermelon, having sex all day, lying out in the sun, making music,
How
uh,
does, how
writing
does
a
that
book.
sound?
You know what I mean?
You
It's
need
like,
an MBA to figure that one out. Like, no, that's true, right? So this whole thing is, and I think that's maybe we can conclude is like I'm all about this idea of storyboarding, like and this is what I think I haven't captured the indigenous imagination yet because they're all like, right, they're visual people. Like, what's the story that I can, and maybe I can't give them a new story at all, but let's storyboard this thing and walk into that storyboard like any good filmmaker would do, right? Because
let's,
we need a new story
let's do it. Let's do it.
and let's do it. And I think we can do it. Um,
Well, if you're, here's how we can pause for now, Mark. If you're listening to this episode and you've made it this far,
that's far.
and you want to join Mark and me for an experience to storyboard the future of what humanity can walk into, then give us a ping. I'll put some kind of form in the show notes that you could fill up and express your interest. And if enough people do, maybe we'll put something together and have an experience together.
And then we'll get GameStop at scale
Yeah.
for us. And it's over,
Instead
right?
of GameStop, we'll get Game On.
Game on. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, not game stop, but game on.
Game Start.
You know who Ray Dalio is, right?
I do.
So I'm like, I met his bipolar son like during COVID, right? Because I was thrown into this task force humanity group that Andy Russell started and Choco and then uh I got introduced to. I didn't know it was Dalio's son, right? But guy was brilliant and he could see through that. He had episodic moments, right? But I'm like, you've seen through the Matrix, and your dad is the biggest hedge fund guy.
Yeah, that's
And I'm
right.
like, what if the MasterCard is no more? Like, he was telling me about his paranoia. Like, he looked at the MasterCard symbol and he was like, holy shit, we're
Mm,
under the MasterCard. Like, and then you realize D Hawk, who was a real creator of Visa,
yeah.
he was the author of like chaotic organizations.
Mm,
And the banks had to create MasterCard to take down Visa because the original idea of Visa was that you and I would become each other's credit score, just like with your friend.
yeah.
And they had to take that down because why? Anyway, it's just so like I keep thinking about game on. Yeah, it is game on.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like I just don't know how to start. Like what's the catalyst? What gets us to go, yeah, we can do that. And we start with a few and then
Well, I've got my art, I've got a global community called Our Emerging Future. If anybody's listening to this and you're not a part of it, you can go to ouremergingfuture.com and join our community. We've got hundreds of people from around the world who are the most conscious, brilliant, self-leading, heart open, just gorgeous human beings that you'd ever want to get to hang around with. And so I'll post this offering in the Our Emerging Future community as well and see who wants to come storyboard a new game with us and see if anybody takes to it.
Yeah, like we get Mr. My friend Charles Eisenstein. Like, come on, Charles. Like, come on, let's do this, man. Like,
Yeah, and I was just hanging out with Daniel Schmachtenberger and
and
Ashley.
I know Daniel. He was part of our group, the Task Force Humanity, right?
Yeah,
Brilliant guy.
invite him, Sarah, a bunch of folks. We'll get a whole gang of us and have some
Yeah,
fun.
we probably know the same people. Like, anyways.
Okay.
Yeah, this is fun. Thank you for creating the space for. I know as a podcast guy, like it's sometimes I know I tend to. My wife says, "Did you ever let your guest talk?" Like, anyways, but it's fun just being a guest.
Well, thanks
Uh,
for sharing so openly and fully. It's fun to know more. I mean, I learned more about you in this podcast that I didn't know before, and I experience you as such a treasure trove of wisdom and experiences and a really lived life. So thanks for being you and for being willing to share. And let's see, I'll let you know how the listeners respond. Yeah, I usually get quite a few notes and texts and emails and things for every episode. So I'll forward that feedback to you.
awesome. So until we meet again, it's game on. Well, almost.
Thanks, Mark. And thanks, everybody. Love you all.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for being here and
Love you
listening
all
and
too.
exploring with us.